This absolute buffoon thought he could beat me in a mapping contest. The premise is simple: fix the worst map in the worst game mode of TF2, 2Fort. There's a million ways to tackle this problem, but I decided to fix 2Fort by starting at the center, then updating the map bit by bit, cascading out from the center. The theory was that this should create a reasonably pushable map in the end, since I'm going through the map as if I'm attacking, trying to grab the intel. If I started from the intel room instead, for example, I think changes I make could be inadvertently biased to favoring defenders. So the very first change I made was to block off the sniper deck, which isn't the middle area I just said I wanted to start with. I did actually try to start at the bridge, but I was basically stuck in a situation where the design of middle depends on knowing what kind of sightlines the deck has. But I also can't decide on the deck's design without knowing what middle would be. What I ended up doing was taking care of the deck first, since middle is a bigger and more important part of the map in the grand scheme of things. So messing that up would be way worse. The deck is also physically smaller, so if I needed to come back to fix this, it'd be much less painful than trying to redo middle. So why get rid of it? This deck serves two purposes: to make snipers happy, and second, to allow quick access to middle, or if you spawned here, a way to walk back to the main one. I reasoned that snipers don't need to be happy. Running between the two spawns isn't impeded even if it's sealed off, and if it's later found that the quick access to mid was super important, there's plenty of ways I can recreate that without the massive sightline. So without a reason to keep it around, this was sealed. This could be entirely wrong, or there's some other better solution, but to at least have somewhere to begin with the map, I thought this was good enough. So with that decided, what should middle be? After a few hours playing Valve's 2Fort, what stood out to me as the biggest problem was how awkward the bridge is. It's cramped, yet it's the only way across. The bridge itself has these annoying railings that trap you inside, and fighting the few privileged classes that get to stand on the roof is pretty rough. With that in mind, I explored several ideas. Simply having multiple bridges, a fortress in the middle, but nothing spoke to me. One of the first layouts I toyed with was to just duplicate the bridge 2 more times. This didn't feel terrible, judging from walking around it on my own. The gaps between the bridges seemed interesting, and it tackles the restrictiveness of stock 2Fort. But even assuming no sniper deck, these sightlines inspired no confidence. So this is where a fortress in the middle came into the picture. Maybe a big structure in the middle would solve this? Inspired by the massive tower on Red's deck, I made a simple box over the bridges to see if this had any potential to it. I also tried having it face the other way, but in the end I dropped it. Forecasting what might happen if I continue down this path, I didn't think I could make a fair and fun high ground to engage with, while also making sure engineers can't kill the fun building on it. From here, I tried importing interesting geometry from other maps to see if any inspiration would come of it. There was a period where I had the boxes from Badlands and the bridges rotated, with various structures surrounding it. But I kinda hated this because it was so incoherent. The second thing I tried was to copy Landfall. To prep for this challenge, I ran a stream to play through all the CTF maps to refresh myself on them, and Landfall seemed to hold up the best. So I plopped a ring into my map, and it was kinda cool. So my next thought was, how far could I take this? Stacking 2 didn't seem offensive to me, but I stopped at 3. While a fight between layer 1 and 2 would probably be fine, fighting between a possible layer 3 and 1 looked terrible, and layer 3 to ground level looked very bad. But 2 layers, that seemed pretty sick. I don't recall seeing something like this in TF2 before, and I could see combat being interesting on it, so this is what became my central area. I had a wood plank as layer 3 at one point. Also tried having it slowly spin, but it felt very motion sick, so I gave up on it. But even without the spinning, I thought it would probably still cause the same issues as the old layer 3, so the wood plank died. To later be resurrected as mid-air swimming space. I reasoned that the awkwardness of swimming in the air would make it super impractical as an oppressive high ground. Yet we can keep the interesting parts of the plank, a risky but quick way to cross the gap or grab the health. The last addition to the central structure itself was a cylinder along the core to block sightlines. Well-positioned layers, middle being blocked off, and the fact that in actual gameplay, players would be actively moving around. Whatever kills a sniper gets here should be fair and well-deserved. But this is dumb, right? When I was working on the map, why did I spawn bots to scope out the sidelines when I could get 24 poor viewers to suffer through it instead? That's what should be done, but for the challenge, we agreed to cap playtesting to 4 versions. You can play a specific version as much as you want, but changing something and testing it again would count as a new version. So obviously, you cram as much as you can into a map version at once, then test. This is what's forcing me to theorycraft through the entire first pass of 2 Fort. After settling on the central structure, I considered that the walkable space wasn't too thin, but they aren't wide either. It seemed like knockback could get really annoying, especially since you're immediately banished to the sewer. So I added 2 paths along the edges that should make it less punishing. If you still end up in the sewer after this, you truly deserve it. They happen to double as neat subversion to the high ground as well, and giving players a fair alternative to crossing the water, paying a low ground tax. At this point, this area is basically done, but one last thing I was concerned about was making sure the high ground never becomes too powerful. I explored potentially having pathways from the sniper deck that overrides them, but what I found was that it would either create a new terrible sniper sightline or be too stupidly cramped. This is how I landed on side paths outside the normal fences. I placed them in the middle since any further and I think the flank starts bleeding influence into the space entering the team bases. So this squarely focuses it on just keeping a check on the central structure. With that, I finally felt ready to move on. The next logical step was the base entrance, which was settled by first deciding what's happening with the area just past it. This lower level funnels into a single choke with nothing else. That's crazy. In the end, I created an entry on the left. I wouldn't mind also creating one to the right, but only after testing if it made sense to. My concern was the right entrance could be the breaking point that gives attackers too much control over the entire lower level, making it impossible for defenders to do anything here. So just the left one to start. A simple cut through the wall is what this should have been, but immediately after making it, oh god, there's a sightline. I could create an alcove here and push everything further down, but this would make actually using the entryway so tedious since you have to go so far out of your way to use it. What I eventually did was raise and lower the floor. With that done, deciding on the doors was simple. I widened both of them and offset the right one to avoid more sightlines. Before continuing on, I did a quick check on how the new stuff fit in, which gave me concerns about players holding the high ground, shooting down at players pushing out. A wall here would be ideal, but I didn't have the talent to make something that aesthetically fits here, so I eventually made this box, which kinda works. And for the other door, boxes to help a bit with having footing to challenge the high ground. These tweaks won't solve everything, but I thought it was enough for the first version, where I can do more if testing goes terribly. Back on track, the problem in the next section is obvious. There is not enough entrances, and the ones that do exist are weirdly restrictive. So what do we do? Adding more entrances into courtyard could work, but that feels more band-aid than truly solving the root issue of attackers having a hard time getting through. I eventually decided that an upper level flank is probably healthier overall and added stairs back here as the probably least bad option. Putting the stairs at the right entrance would allow you to skip past everything, which seems way too good. Stairs at the grate looked iffy since it might be way too good for attackers, invalidating the entire lower level for defenders. So next to the sewer exit it is. These stairs originally came up to an IKEA door showroom, but before even playtesting it, I scrapped it. I was curious to at least try it, but in trying to solve the sightline straight down the stairs, I wasn't satisfied with any prop or blocker solutions here, which led me to enclosing the staircase with a one-way door and high ground to protect it. I was very paranoid that defenders could entirely shut this down and become unpushable. It then became strange to have all these doors everywhere, so it all got simplified. This wasn't planned, but everything I've adjusted up to this point is naturally converging on the courtyard area, so the intel should probably go here. In theory, teams would have a big conflict here in the lower levels and courtyard, culminating into a scramble for the intel, which seems like a good flow. I'm not sure it makes sense to make them fight through the courtyard, but then fight another choke in the basement. There is also the issue of respawn times and distances. Factoring in respawn times, the total time it would take to trek from spawn to the basement seems way too long, and it looks really hard for attackers to apply enough pressure on the defense to take the intel, so moving it up here seems right. With everything basically done, I made the choice to close off the spawn next to courtyard, since I didn't think it makes sense to spawn 4 steps away from the intel, and it probably would clash with the staircase up, where either defenders get spawn camped or attackers can't make use of it. So everyone spawns in this room now. Finally, I looped back to the sewers and simplified it. I think the sewer's job as a backdoor works fine, and there's nothing to change about it. I did remove the room though, since it's kinda pointless. Engineers set up there and either attackers have an unnecessarily hard time using the sewers, or defenders can't use it to subvert control over the center. I gave the main pool of water big head low grav mode. There's nothing smart about this, it's just to make the lower area slightly more interesting, but it accidentally ended up being a cool way to balance escaping the sewer, where you have to platform out. And last, I stole the core from Atom Smash and put it in the middle. It was a random idea I got and wanted to try after the box I made. I ended up enjoying it and wrote a small VScript function to fling you when you touch it, since phasing through it doesn't make sense and standing on it would have gameplay implications. But with that, it's done. So how catastrophic were the playtests? It actually went really well for the first 3 sessions, where I felt everything I tried worked out for the most part. There were many moments where the attacking team would happen to collect together at the lower level and coordinate a push on the fly, which was super fun. There weren't any massive problems, and what I fixed were reacting to areas being too easy or too hard. So after the 3 playtest sessions, the platforms to parkour out of sewers were simplified. Sometimes a demo can completely lock down the grate area in such a way that trying to walk along this edge to challenge him is way too hard, so I added a prop jump here. I added an extra staircase here to a small room with a window to help with sentries. It was still sometimes too hard for attackers to break through, which I think is down to insufficient healing, so I added health packs, but also went for an invincible map dispenser. This sounds weird, but it's actually very straightforward. You want team-specific healing, so you can make sure it only benefits attackers trying to break through, rather than helping a team stall the match out with a stranglehold on mid. One test after the staircase was added, I extended it. Importantly, it has a one-way door, so you can use it to skip over everything and cap immediately. It's only useful to apply pressure to the courtyard, or to help if your team is stuck at the grate. But here is probably the most controversial move I make. I add 2 horsemen. The winner of this contest is decided by the viewer. They play the map and vote. What if, when they play it, there's a 60-year stalemate and everyone hates the map? What do? Obviously, I try not to be stalematey, but at some point, teams could be terribly balanced and it just happens. What if there's a way to cap how long a stalemate could be? Enter the Horseman Insurance. A timer takes down, and if either flag is never touched, the horsemen do a few magic tricks. But at any time, if there's interaction with the flag, the timer resets and the horseman deferred. This was tried in the last playtest I had left, and it seems workable. It did its job at breaking a stalemate when a team simply couldn't handle the sentries, and it was fun trying to sneak past him to take the intel. Surely it'll be fine, right? So you know how this video is like, Great Blue is a massive idiot. Actually, I'm the idiot. I lost the vote. The voices lied to me. After losing, it's not hard to point out every way the horseman probably made me lose. He always spawns with 5000 HP, no matter what, which is fine for 24 players, so how is this a problem? Voting was originally planned to take place during a series of live streams, but plans changed at the end to run 2 24/7 servers for a week instead. I didn't expect it to be a problem, so it's my mistake to accept the change in plans. But this meant instead of players only ever experiencing full server matches with the live streams, there were many games of 6v6, 8v8, and so on, with a horseman meant for 2 times more players to be around. Would have been good if its health scaled, so 5 people don't have to deal 5000 damage. Since the horsemen were added at the last playtest, they only ever got tested once, and that was it, nothing more. Which was awkward, because in that one test, they took a bit too long to show up. The timer was too long. I changed the numbers afterwards, but it was guesswork that should have been more refined. Another thing I didn't have time for was changing his behavior. The horsemen were added in reaction to excessive sentry camping, so ideally, he'd ignore players and only fight buildings, then leave. He could have also been contextual to the courtyard, only spawning if there were too many sentries here, scaling his health based on sentries present. Could have helped to add markers that show the range of the horsemen as well. Valve programmed them to never stray too far from their spawn position, so as they're chasing you, there's a magical sea bear line that makes them shrug and give up. Overall, I did take the gamble of adding the horsemen despite these problems, so the failure is on me. Frick. Besides the horsemen, the map dispensers are confusing and some people try to fight them. Making a uber texture for the dispenser would help here, so it can flash when attacked. I think the backstairs were awkward too, being so out of the way, so players end up ignoring it, then get mad there are 5 sentries in the courtyard they can't destroy, even though you can shoot them in the back. If I had infinite time, it would be cool to solve this and have upper access that flows better with the actual gameplay. Zooming all the way out, it would have been cool to try other map layouts too. I don't think the one I stuck with was the best I could do, but the limit on testing makes it too costly to scrap and restart. You're down to just 2 more playtests afterwards, and what happens if it doesn't go well? Now you're really deep in the hole. But alas. We agreed not to look at each other's maps while working, so we didn't influence each other, which is funny that we basically thought of the same problems and solved them differently. We both tried a structure in the middle, but I didn't stick with it. He did. We both opened up the left side, just that his cuts through the sewers and expands the back to cut into the Intel basement. We both created a route to the upper level, but he wasn't as bothered about defenders here, while I was way more concerned and created the door and ledge to protect them. For the most part, I think both our maps have their merits, and it's basically down to what kind of gameplay you prefer out of TF2. If you want to hear more about his map, check out his video.